In the West, some are broken by the silence, and others are forged in it. A soul mistaken for being tame is often the one with the wildest fire waiting inside. The wedding dress, its lace yellowed by the Nebraska sun, hung from a nail inside the covered wagon. It was a ghost of a promise made in a different life. Eliza Reed sat on the edge of a hard cot, her hands knotted in her calico apron. Outside, the prairie stretched into an endless heat-shimmered horizon. The wind whispered through the dry grass, a lonely sound that matched the emptiness in her chest. Marriage hadn't been a sanctuary, it had been a sentence, and she had long since stopped hoping for a pardon. Through the thin canvas, she heard the low murmur of voices. Her husband, Jedediah Crow, spoke with a confidence that always chilled her. He wasn't bartering for supplies, he was trading her, not for gold, but for a piece of paper, a false deed to a worthless silver claim in Colorado called The Last Hope. She knew the mine was barren. She'd read the letter from Jedediah's own cousin, which he thought he had burned. The clink of whiskey glasses sealed the bargain, a life traded for a lie. A bitter coldness spread through her, pushing out the fear. There were no tears. Tears were a luxury she could no longer afford. Jedediah had called her obedient. He had assured the two buyers, his voice thick with condescension, that she would cause no trouble. He was wrong. Her silence wasn't submission. It was a whetstone, and she was sharpening her resolve upon it. Every quiet moment, every bowed head, had been a preparation for this one. That night, the campfire threw dancing shadows against the wagon. The laughter of the three men was a harsh, grating sound. Eliza moved without a sound. She took nothing but a small pouch of water and the stale bread from her last meal. She slipped past the tethered horses and into the consuming darkness of the plains. She had no map, no weapon, only a certainty that any direction away from that fire was the right one. She was leaving the cage behind. The sun rose like a judgment, finding Eliza collapsed beside a dry creek bed. Her feet were raw, her lips cracked and bleeding. The world had dissolved into a haze of exhaustion and thirst. This, she thought with a strange sense of peace, was the end. The prairie that had promised freedom had instead claimed her. She closed her eyes, the grit of the earth on her cheek, and waited for the silence to take her completely. She had run as far as her body would allow. She woke to the cool metal of a canteen against her lips. A man knelt beside her, his movements fluid and deliberate. He was Lakota, his face framed by long black hair, his buckskin clothes worn with use. His eyes, the color of dark river stones, held a stern intensity, but no cruelty. He said nothing, simply held the canteen steady as she drank the life-giving water in desperate, shuddering gulps. He moved with the patience of a hunter. "He sold me," she finally whispered, her voice a raw rasp. The man nodded once, his expression unchanging. It was an acknowledgement, not a question. His name was Chayton, he said, his own voice low and steady. It meant Falcon. He had not found her by chance. He had been tracking the two men who had bought her. They were traitors who left a trail of broken trust wherever they went. He had been ensuring they left his people's lands. He looked from her to the vast, empty plains. "You can return to that cage," he said, his gaze meeting hers. "Or you can walk with me and learn to fly." It wasn't a command or an offer of rescue. It was a choice, stark and clear. It was the first real choice she had been given in years. Without hesitation, Eliza reached out and took his offered hand. His grip was firm, steady, and for the first time, she felt the ground solid beneath her feet. Chayton led her north, away from the flat plains and toward the sacred silhouette of the Pahasapa, the Black Hills. Their journey was wrapped in a profound quiet. The silence wasn't empty, it was a healing balm on the raw wounds of her past life. She learned the rhythm of his pace, the economy of his movements. The land itself seemed to speak to him, and in the quiet she began to learn its language too. He taught her without many words. He would point to a turned stone, showing how a deer had passed. He would gesture to a plant, its roots a source of water. She watched him move through the wilderness not as a conqueror, but as a part of it. His strength was not in boasts or threats, but in a deep, abiding knowledge that made the boastful men she had known seem like loud, frightened children. One evening, by the light of a small, smokeless fire, he finally spoke of his purpose. "Those men, they trade in whiskey and lies. They poison the land and the people," he explained, his eyes on the flames. "I follow them not for revenge, but to protect my home, my family." He wasn't saving her because she was a helpless woman. He was saving her because she was a victim of the same poison he fought against. A quiet understanding settled between them. Her rescue was not a whim, it was an extension of his duty, his integrity. She watched him mend a tear in his moccasin with a bone needle, his hands sure and practiced. A warmth spread through her chest, a feeling so foreign she barely recognized it. It was respect, a respect that felt far more intimate than the hollow affection she had once mistaken for love. From a high, windswept ridge they saw them. A posse of riders moving across the valley floor below, kicking up a trail of dust. At the lead was not just Jedediah, his form slumped in the saddle with grim determination, but a man with a tin star gleaming on his vest. The marshal from Promise Creek. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. The law was hunting her. Or rather, Jedediah's version of the law. "He brought a lawman," she breathed, the words tasting of ash. Chaitin's expression remained calm, his eyes narrowed. "They do not hunt only you," he said, his voice low. "They hunt anyone who does not fit their world. Their law is a fence they build to tame what should be wild." He had seen this before. The star on the man's chest was not a symbol of justice, but of ownership. That night, a storm rolled in, the clouds bruising the sky with dark purples and grays. They found shelter in a shallow cave carved into the rock. The wind howled outside, and flashes of lightning illuminated the plains in stark, ghostly detail. The world felt violent and raw, a mirror of the turmoil inside her. She huddled in her blanket, the chill seeping deep into her bones. Chaitin sat near the mouth of the cave, a silent sentinel watching the storm. He turned to her, his face lit for a moment by a distant flash of lightning. "Their law is a chain," he said, his voice cutting through the roar of the wind. "They believe they can bind the land, the rivers, the people. True freedom is knowing that no chain can hold your spirit, unless you allow it." His words struck her with the force of the thunder that followed. The days that followed were a crucible. The softness of her old life was burned away, replaced by a lean, hardened strength. Her hands, once accustomed to needlepoint, were now calloused from gathering wood and dressing small game. Chaitin taught her to move silently, to read the sky for weather, and to listen not just with her ears, but with her entire being. "The land is always speaking," he told her. "You must only learn to be quiet enough to hear it." One afternoon, she knelt to drink from a clear, cold spring. She saw her reflection and paused. The woman looking back was a stranger. Her skin was darkened by the sun, her hair was wild and untamed, and her eyes held a fire that startled her. They were the eyes of someone who had been tested and had not broken. They were the eyes of a survivor. That evening she told him everything. Not just about the final betrayal, but about the years of quiet humiliations, the slow erosion of her soul under Jedediah's control. She spoke of her father, who had married her off to settle a debt. She spoke until the words ran dry. Chaitin listened, his gaze never leaving her face. He didn't offer pity or empty comforts. He simply listened. When she was finished, he reached into his sheath and drew a knife. It was smaller than his, the handle worn smooth with use. "This belonged to my sister," he said, offering it to her, hilt first. "She was a warrior in her own way. Now, this is yours. Not for revenge. It is to remember who you are now, when they come for you again." She took the blade. It felt balanced in her hand. It felt like a piece of her own reclaimed soul. They found them in a wide open basin where there was nowhere to run. The marshal, a man with a face like sour milk, rode forward. "In the name of the law, Eliza Crow, you will return to your husband." His voice boomed, full of false authority. Jedediah watched from behind him, a smug, possessive look on his face. But Eliza felt no fear, only a cold, sharp clarity. She stepped forward, her new knife at her belt, her head held high. She ignored the marshal and looked directly at his young deputy, a boy with honest eyes who seemed out of place. Her voice was not loud, but it carried on the wind. "Ask my husband," she said, her tone level and calm, "about the Last Hope silver mine. Ask him why he didn't tell his partners the claim was worthless 10 years ago." A thick silence fell over the posse. The two men who had bought her exchanged a sharp, angry glance. The young deputy's eyes widened, and he looked from Eliza to a suddenly pale Jedediah. The lie was out, hanging in the air like dust. Chayton stood beside her, his bow held loosely in his hand. It was not a threat, but a statement. He was a witness to the truth. The marshal's authority crumbled. He could not enforce a bargain built on fraud. To use force now would be to expose himself as nothing more than a bully for hire. He shot Jedediah a look of pure disgust, wheeled his horse around and rode away without another word. The posse followed, leaving Jedediah alone and exposed on the plain. Eliza had won, not with a blade, but with the truth. In the quiet days that followed, a new kind of peace settled between them. The tension of the chase was gone, replaced by a comfortable harmony. They walked not as pursuer and pursued or protector and protected, but as equals. The silence was now filled with shared glances and small smiles. One evening she watched him carve a piece of wood, his hands moving with an artist's grace. He finally shared the weight of his own past. He spoke of a wife and child lost to the coughing sickness that had swept through their camp, a sickness brought by settlers. He spoke of the struggle of his people to hold on to their way of life. "We honor our ancestors by walking forward," he said, his voice heavy with memory but free of bitterness. "To stop is to let their memory die." His story gave her own a new perspective. Her journey was not just an escape, it was a continuation, a fight for the right to exist, a right to have a future. She found a fallen branch of willow, its wood pale and strong. With the tip of her new knife, she began to carve. She didn't have the skill of Chayton, but her marks were firm and deliberate. She did not draw a flame or a blade. She carved the image of a slender tree beside a winding river. It was a tree that bent in the harshest wind but whose roots held firm in the earth, drawing strength from the water. It was a symbol of resilience, not aggression. It was her story, not of what was done to her, but of what she had become. She had not broken, she had learned to bend. They arrived at a hidden camp of the Lakota, nestled in a valley deep within the heart of the Black Hills. Smoke curled from hide lodges, and the sounds of children's laughter filled the air. An old woman with eyes as bright and knowing as a hawk's came to meet them. She was Chayton's grandmother, a revered elder named He Who Remembers. She did not look at Eliza with suspicion. She looked into her, her gaze peeling back the layers of fear and hardship to see the core of the woman beneath. Eliza felt compelled to tell her story, the words flowing more easily now. The old woman listened patiently, nodding her head slowly as if she were hearing a familiar song. She saw not a victim, but a spirit that had refused to be extinguished. When Eliza finished, the elder took her hands. Her skin was like wrinkled parchment, but her grip was strong. "The name Eliza is a ghost," she said, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "It belongs to a woman who is no more. Your spirit has walked a hard path and has not faltered. You will be called Mina." She paused. "It means, she who carves her own path." Mina. The name settled over her like a warm blanket. It was not given out of pity. It was an acknowledgement of her journey, a title she had earned. The last chains of her past fell away. She was no longer Eliza Reed, the bartered wife. She was Mina, a woman of the Pahasapa. Chayton stood beside her, a rare, small smile on his lips. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, and also as if he had known her all along. Months passed. The seasons turned. Mina learned the rhythms of the camp, the ways of the women, the songs of the children. She learned to tan hides and grind corn, her hands finding purpose in the steady work of survival and community. She found a belonging she had never known. Then one day a lone rider appeared on the horizon, moving slowly, hesitantly. It was Jedediah. He looked like a hollowed-out version of the man she had known. His clothes were ragged, his face gaunt. He had not come with lawmen or threats. He had come with a small, heavy pouch of gold dust, the profits from some other swindle. He stopped his horse at the edge of the river, not daring to enter the camp. Mina went to meet him, with Chayton walking silently a few paces behind. "Eliza, he began, his voice weak. "I brought this. It's for you. Come back. We can start again. In California, maybe?" He held out the pouch like a pathetic offering. Mina looked at him, at the pouch, and then at the free-flowing river. "The woman you knew died on the prairie," she said, her voice calm and even. "My name is Mina. And my path is here." He stared at her, finally understanding. It wasn't hatred in her eyes that defeated him. It was indifference. She was a stranger to him now, a woman whose spirit he could no longer touch, let alone own. He had lost her not when she ran, but when he had looked at her and seen only an object to be sold. Without another word, he turned his horse and rode away, a lonely figure swallowed by the vast landscape. Spring returned to the Black Hills, painting the valleys with wildflowers. Life bloomed anew, not just on the land, but within Mina's heart. With the help of Chayton and the other members of the camp, she began to build her own lodge near the riverbank. Not a temporary shelter, but a home. She wove the willow branches, her hands strong and sure, creating a place of safety and permanence. Their bond, forged in silence and shared struggle, deepened into a quiet, unspoken love. It was in the way he brought her the first spring berries, or the way she would mend his moccasins while he sat by the fire. It was a partnership of souls who had seen the worst of the world and had chosen to build something beautiful in its wake. It needed no grand declarations. It simply was. One evening, as they sat outside her nearly finished lodge, watching the stars ignite in the darkening sky, he reached over and took her hand. His touch was warm and certain. "This is your home, Mina," he said, his voice soft in the twilight. "Your path has led you here." She looked at his hand holding hers, at the sturdy frame of her lodge, and at the sacred hills that had become her sanctuary. A profound sense of peace settled over her, a feeling she had once believed impossible. It was not just the absence of fear. It was the presence of belonging. She leaned her head against his shoulder, the gesture as natural as breathing. The fire inside her, the one Jedediah had tried so hard to extinguish, had not gone out. It had simply found its hearth. Here, by the river, it could burn brightly, freely, and for as long as she wished.